Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lee Montville, and I'm the Director of Special Sales at Springer Publishing. Today we are presenting Big Picture Planning for Quality Improvement Projects, Tips for Helping Students, with Wanda Bonnell, Faculty Emeritus at the University of Kansas School of Nursing, and Catherine Smith, an Associate Professor Emeritus at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Nursing and Health Sciences. Wanda is a geriatrics and nursing education specialist who has taught master's, DNP, and doctoral courses, including advanced clinical residencies and DNP project courses. Catherine Smith has taught in both undergraduate and graduate nursing programs, facilitating advanced clinical projects throughout the early conceptual phases. Before we begin, a quick reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand at springerpub.com/videos in 5 to 7 business days post-live event. If you have any questions today, please type them into the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel, and I'll bring them up at the end of the presentation. If you forget to ask a question, there will be a brief survey sent at the end of the webinar, and you can include your questions there. Now let's get started. I'll turn the presentation over to Wanda and Catherine now.
Well, welcome, everybody. We are certainly glad that you are here. I'm Dr. Wanda Bonnell, and I, as you heard, have been faculty at KU for many years. And I have thoroughly enjoyed working with our DNP students. Actually, when we first started our DNP program and started doing DNP projects, we found, you may be surprised, that many of our students were fairly confused about the process of putting together a DNP project. So based on some of the things we learned from our early students and working over the years, some of the ideas we're going to be sharing with you today have come from those early experiences in trying to help our students be successful, as well as making it doable projects for faculty as well. So again, thank you. Kit?
And as noted, I'm Dr. Catherine Smith. I go by Dr. Kit Smith, and I've taught at the University of Missouri in Kansas City for many years. We also want to acknowledge another member of our team, Dr. Colleen Paramesh. She's a practicing DNP, and she's also on faculty at the University of Kansas, where she teaches in the DNP project courses. We welcome you all. We're awfully glad you're here. There you go. We're just want to review the objectives for today. The first is to help students consider the big picture of the DNP project. And the emphasis there is big picture. So hopefully we can give you some new tips on how to do that. Secondly, to consider more specifically assignments that focus on visual design that will help students organize, communicate, reflect, and document the big picture. So tips there, I think the emphasis being on visual design. And then finally, how to guide students in reflecting on project components, particularly as they address quality of care and documenting the essentials. So reflection is really our main topic in that one. Next slide, please. So as we get started today, I wonder if there's anything that surprised you as you've worked with DNP students and DNP projects. For me, I generally love the enthusiasm DNP students bring to the project, but sometimes I find that, and I'm a little bit surprised by the fact that how hard it is to harness their energy. So how hard it is to sometimes keep them on track. And I mean that both in sense of the process of the DNP project. What's the next step? What's the next step? And keeping them focused on the process that really moves them through their project. But I also mean that in terms of their content. As they're going through the process, they get exposed to so many ideas, and they're all so interesting, but they're also all so scattered. So trying to keep them on track and focused on what their particular project is. And so we wonder what you all have been surprised by. Wanda, how about you? What have you been surprised by?
Well, I would agree with some of the things that you've been sharing, Kit. very similar nature. We've worked with many advanced clinicians, and they bring wonderful ideas, but often they have trouble putting the pieces together or making the pieces fit. And that's, we want to be able to use some of our tools today to help our students get all the pieces of their project to mesh together. It also, another challenge that we sometimes find is we want our projects for our students to be doable, both from their success perspective and faculty perspective as well. So again, we're hoping that by looking at some, we'll talk to you about some one-page documents for putting the big picture together early on, and we're hoping that that will help students deal with some of these challenges. So that's what we would like to do this morning. And if we could have the next slide, please. Okay, so let's think, why are big picture tools important for quality improvement DNP projects? Well, it makes me happy to think about quality improvement for these projects, because quality improvement basically is problem solving at its finest. It really, we want to help our students who, as you well know, are in many diverse settings. And so again, quality improvement models, they can move from patients with congestive heart failure in long-term care, a project to help them, or improving diabetes care in rural clinics. So quality improvement, it helps us solve problems. It's pretty broad and applies to many settings. And the goals, of course, with quality improvement are to improve practice. And we also, with our projects, are wanting our students to be prepared for clinical scholarship and engaging it in the future. So again, this problem solving and clinical scholarship go hand in hand. And I know, as you're well aware, that the AACN Essentials emphasize QI as a key focus. So again, we're helping our students show competencies with the AACN Essentials that they show develop quality improvement projects. And then, as we mentioned, quality improvement builds on systems and populations. So Kit and I are encouraging you to think along with us so that you can gain the most, maybe projects you're already working on, or some that you are hoping to help students plan. What are the structure, process, and outcomes that your students will be seeking? So, next slide, please. And we would like to start sharing a couple big picture tools that Kit and I have particularly enjoyed. And again, why big picture tools? Why are these important? Because again, these are tools in particular that we have students at the beginning of their projects summarize in one page. Now, of course, they don't know everything as they're beginning their project, but you have to start somewhere. So if we start with a visual tool such as the project triangle, it's easier for them to plot out key components on one page rather than get a 20 to 30 page document put together and we figure out that there's some big problems that we didn't address. We're missing some of the pieces. So if we could look at the next slide, let us walk you through. Kit and I are sharing some tools that we particularly find useful. But again, project triangle and checklists, they come in different sizes and shapes. So we're sharing ones that we find particularly useful. And you may have already started some of these and gained some ideas for enhancing those today. So again, you have to start somewhere. So we have our project triangle up here. And what we're going to assume is that you have already worked with your students on that all-important top line of defining a problem. So whether they have done informal or formal needs assessments, but they are coming to you with this project triangle with a problem that is named and hopefully defined. And as you'll notice at the bottom of our triangle, within a particular context and with resources, doable resources. So you'll also notice that the three center circles, now that we've thought about those pieces, we want our students to be very clear on what the purpose of their project is going to be, because that's going to be guiding everything else. So a clear purpose, it's basically the student's promise to their team, to faculty, what they're going to be doing, what they plan to accomplish. And then once they have a clear statement of purpose that comes from their clearly named problem. Then they have to come up with the methods. What are the methods going to be that we are going to use to attain this purpose? What do we want to implement for this quality improvement project? And how will we know this far circle then are outcomes? How will we know we were successful with this quality improvement project? So that's an important model for us to help us get students started. And you'll notice, and we've got an outer circle as well, and our oval. And what we want to do is have our students using the best evidence, what resources, what literature is out there that will help share the best evidence within the clinical setting, and what models or theories exist to help guide them. And so we've got a case study on the next slide, but I'm going to stay here. Let's stay on this one, and we'll talk about June as she began doing her project triangle. Okay, so June was a geriatric nurse practitioner, worked in long-term care, and you may be surprised to know that she found communication, especially on the phone, between nurses and providers was a problem. So given that, we spent a little time defining the problem, but again, with a purpose that clearly moves from that problem. Her goal, her purpose was to improve communication between nurses and long-term providers, phone communication. She then had to think about the methods that she wanted to use. And okay, so how do you achieve this? Well, there are multiple ways, but she would brainstorm, and the ones that she came up with were to have an educational session and also to put together some pocket cards that were the key diagnoses that we would see in long-term care. And interestingly enough, when she went to the literature, she found that there was best evidence on these communication techniques and these pocket tools specific to diagnoses from the American Medical Directors Association. So already the best evidence has helped her put her project together. And then we have theories and models. As we said, we're enthused about quality improvement for problem solving. So that guided her each of the steps through her project. And her outcomes then, basically, how could she evaluate, was there improved communication between the staff and providers? And again, you have to start somewhere. So June, for her project, she did surveys of staff in terms of knowledge gain and comfort and use of the pocket tools in talking with the providers. So that was how we got June started with her problem. And now, next slide, please. And we've just talked about June. So now next slide, we're going to talk about June again. So Kit and I have said we'll talk about visuals, and we like the triangle. I'm a visual learner, and it's helpful to me to see things and make sure that I've got all the pieces coming together. But again, as we've said with our students, we want to encourage them not only to be thinking big picture, but to keep moving forward. And so we have thought about the benefits of a beginning checklist. And I'm sure some of you have, or most of you maybe, have already used checklists. Basically, it's a simple tool that we can provide with our students that says, is it there? Have you done this? Is this addressed? And so if we think back, let's just real quickly run through this checklist. Again, one that Kit and I have liked working with. And was she able to find evidence to guide her project? That worked well. She had the AMDA pocket guides and resources for her education programs. Quality or a theory or conceptual model, quality improvement to the rescue for her. How about a logistics or context with the assessment of the unit or setting? And again, she had named who it was going to be, but again, this encourages her to think a little bit further. Okay, so is it going to be just RNs? Is it going to be LPNs? Is it going to be full-time, part-time, PRN? Who are these people going to be? And basically, have you confirmed with these people that they're ready to work with you? Just like good quality improvement strategies tell us, is this going to be something that staff want to do with you? So, and again, we've talked about her purpose to enhance communication and flowing from the problem of poor communication. The methods, we've talked about the education and the pocket cards. Again, the pocket cards are something more than just a one-time program. So again, something that hopefully they would hang on to and do well with. And then the outcomes, again, we have to think we've got all these pieces. Now we've got to know how was it successful. And again, we talked about how we would look at the knowledge and the comfort and use of the tools. So, and finally, one that many of you, I'm guessing, have already run into as a potential problem is the feasibility of the project. So again, this is just a reminder, a checklist. Have you thought with your staff? Have you thought big picture about what facilitators or barriers might be for doing this particular project? Okay, next slide, please.
I'm going to jump in here.
Okay.
We're talking about assignments now. We're moving on to assignments that help with visualization of the big picture. And as a having been a fairly poor speller my entire life, it was a real revelation to me several years to go find out that good spellers actually visualize the words they're spelling. And I really like that analogy for what we're talking about here today, because it means when a person's a good speller, they can visualize, they can see what their project is and what their goal is. They know that they are going to spell this word and they want to spell it correctly in the end. They also know all the pieces, all the elements. They know all the letters that go into the word, just like the students need to know all the elements of their project. And more than that, though, a good speller can take all those elements and put them together in a meaningful way to spell the word so it conveys something to other people. And same with the project. Students need to be able to put all the pieces together in a meaningful way. So we're going to talk about 3 assignments that help with this visualization: reference matrices, maps and templates, and early abstracts. So next slide, please. The reference matrix, if there is anything that can be as overwhelming as the entire DMP project, it is the review of literature or finding out what's already there. That can just be so overwhelming. So the reference matrix truly is literally a table. I oftentimes just use Microsoft table format for it. And each of the columns in the table is a different source or a different reference. So if they only find 3 sources or references on their topic, there are only 3. But if they find 50, there may be as many as 50. Probably not that are really pertinent to what they're doing, but in any case. And then the columns in the table refer to different aspects or elements of each of those sources. It might be the participants, it might be the settings, might be the methods, might be the findings. So you are picturing now, visualizing this table that has the references going across in rows and these different elements of each of those references in the columns. This is really important because, first of all, it's just a really practical way to help organize and reflect on the elements so it's less overwhelming. Secondly, it helps pull everything together in one place. With our analogy with the word, it helps them put all the letters in one place so nothing drops off the radar. It also helps facilitate the process of having all the information. Boy, I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people use programs now for their references, but for sure the first column in my table would be a really complete and accurate reference. If I think about all the times I had to go back and try and scramble to find the reference, a real time saver there. And then finally, it can move students forward in the synthesis of all that literature. So as they have everything organized in this one place, a really helpful tool, and again, to help visualize what's going on, is they can say, oh, I see 3 articles where they had the same findings. So highlight those 3 areas. So when you get to the synthesis, you know, I want to be sure I include those 3 sources in that particular discussion. Or, oh, there were 3 articles that use this method and 2 that use that method. I want to put those together and synthesize that content when I get to the synthesis of the literature. So we find that visual tool very helpful. Wanda, I think you're doing project map.
Next slide, please. Yes, all righty. Here we have for you another 1-page tool, and we're calling it the project map or template if you prefer. But again, this is a form that we have found useful, and there are other ways to arrange these. So you may be thinking of different ways that you would like to do this. But one thing I did want you to notice here is that we talked big picture of a triangle, big picture, the project triangle, big picture of a checklist, but now big picture of a project map. And in each of these cases, we have tried to advance the student a little bit in terms of what they are accomplishing. So now we're trying to add a little bit more narrative. We've got essentially the same concepts that we've got in the triangle and the checklist, but now we are adding to it and giving the student to start thinking about the more further detail that they're going to be needed in their project. So again, let me use another example. Let's use Brenda as a DNP student using the project map. Now, Brenda worked in ortho leadership, and she was concerned that they didn't have any standardized care paths for basically elective surgeries, and felt like they, because of this, were not getting good quality care for their patients, and were having problems even with outcomes and readmissions. So basically, she put into summary form her problem, that she was worried about the challenges in elective ortho surgeries. If we go down, I'm going to skip down to her purpose. Her purpose then was to enhance care maps of this ortho unit to improve patient and quality and manage certain outcomes. So that was what she was doing. Her context, she, as I said, was in a ortho clinical setting. And what she did was described she was going to work, who was going to work. Fortunately, again, with a quality improvement project, she decided to work with the interprofessional team. So she went to the current best evidence. What were good strategies that she was finding in the evidence to help people in provide standardized care maps in ortho areas? She found some good resources in the ortho literature providers. And so with her purpose laid out to enhance care maps, to improve care for patients and the providers and the hospital, including the hospital, what model? Again, we've got a quality improvement project. Her proposed project methods, what she was going to do was, again, she did this project over several semesters, and she developed from the literature, again, she developed standardized patient education, standardized staff education, and then a standardized care path. And again, this being interprofessional, had to take all those contexts into play as well. So her methods were putting together this educational piece, and again, what outcomes then? How will data be collected? I like the outcomes that she approached because she had some good hospital outcomes already in terms of length of stay and readmission rates. So she didn't have to create anything for the hospital side. And then again, she put together a knowledge and plans to use survey for her staff that she was providing this education to. Okay, and so now we've kind of finished off the triangle, but now we're saying, okay, we need to keep thinking, what tools are you going to be using to collect this data? Do they have a good quality measure? Again, we can't go over all that today, but again, thinking of select resources to help students do that. Then we're moving into the official quality improvement plan in point 9. Who's going to do this? Who's going to collect the data? How will the methods be systematic and rigorous? So again, we're just reminding students to keep adding further detail. How will the data be analyzed? And Kit and I, when we do these projects, we like to ask our students to think way ahead to when they have data in hand and what kind of tables they will use to share this data, whether it's a descriptive table of staff characteristics, whether it is a t-test about the pre and post outcomes for discharge and length of stay. And then finally, number 11 reminds everybody, again, this is a quality improvement is a team approach. Have we talked with the staff? Are the staff open to doing this? And how are we going to engage them in doing this project? So again, a big picture project map of 1 page. It is so much easier, as we have been saying, to get everybody to see if we've got all the boxes filled in, if all the things are meshing. And I don't know how many times I have helped students look at one of these 1-page documents, and within just a few minutes, I can say, wait a second, this won't measure that, or this won't be useful in getting to this particular outcome. So again, just the value of these 1-page documents before you move into the longer format for the proposals. So that has been helpful for us. And then next slide, please. You may find this interesting that I would be talking about project abstracts at the beginning of a proposal. I know you're all familiar with abstracts, and usually you think about those being at the end of a big project. But what I have found is useful, again, trying to move the students forward, we just were on that template that they were working on. And so we moved them. Now we want them to start putting more narrative together and thinking about how this template would move to a one-page abstract, a one-page document that, again, kind of starts with that end in mind. You don't have the data yet, you don't have the actual tables, but you can talk about what you're going to be showing and think about what needs to be there. So again, we're moving from the key pieces to a beginning narrative. I'm guessing that many of you, as you do these kinds of things, are thinking, well, if I'm going to have the students do this, I better have a checklist for them so that they can check off that they have all of these tools before they talk with me. And I would agree with you that the more that we can do with the student accountability, the better it is. You are busy faculty, and we want everybody to step up and do their best to get good quality care for our patients with these projects. So next slide, please. All right. So as we are thinking about how busy our students are, how busy we are as faculty, we want to engage as much as possible students in self-responsibility. We want them to be aware that the essentials are an important part of their program, and it's a broad piece to help them prepare to be a scholarly clinician. And we want them to pull in quality improvement. I kind of like the questions, what happened, so what, and now what? So again, we will use some of these pieces, and I'm sure that you thought about checklists and rubrics, but let's think just a little bit more about it in the next slide, please. Okay, again, with busy faculty, if you start with your checklists, and checklists basically, as we just showed with the one that June completed on her long-term care setting, it says, is this piece of the project there, or is it not? Yes or no. It's pretty easy to go through. And so students can relatively easily, and maybe this is where you start with the checklist, yes or no, and you share with a colleague, a peer, are you finding these pieces? I know they're there, but do you read them? Do you see them as well? And that we do these things before they get to you as a faculty or their mentor in the clinical setting. So, and sometimes the checklists in many cases work pretty well. But again, when we're working with our students to be professionals, maybe peer review can go a notch higher, or maybe self-review can go a notch higher with rubrics. And so with the rubrics, in some ways, you can just think of those as a checklist where now we've added a rating scale. You start, is it there? And is it poor, fair, or good? And add a line where you could suggest improvements. So you can talk for hours about rubrics and how to put the best rubric together, but in many ways, starting with a checklist, what you as faculty want to guide your students to have in their projects, what needs to be there. That starts maybe as a checklist, or maybe it is a rubric where you've added poor, fair, good, and a place for comments. And as Kit and I have talked, we sometimes need to really orient our students that it's supposed to be good, encouraging feedback, not just, no, that's really bad. So I'm sure you've had some experiences with that as well. So sometimes there's an orientation piece as well. So,
and Wanda, also not, oh, that's all just great too. Not all that's terrible, all that's good, but something really constructive.
Great. Okay, that's what that little line is for. Yes, I agree. Okie doke. All righty. Now let's move to our next slide, please. All right, project notebook opportunities. I would like to share with you that I have done many projects over the course of my career, and with each of them, I have done a project notebook. A project notebook for me has been a collection of the pieces that have gone into my project. What happens, unfortunately for me, and I'm guessing for some of our students as well, is if you're developing a project over weeks or months or even semesters, that pieces get forgotten, pieces get overlooked. And so this can be a notebook, and I'm a big fan of a bright red notebook so I can keep track of it, but it can be electronic as well, as if you'd like. So this project involves the products that students have put together in developing their project. And it also includes a reflective component. What were the good pieces of this particular component? What are the challenges? What areas do we need to work further on? So again, having one place for our students to keep track of all of their documents that have gone into their project is a useful tool. Again, it's student accountability. Here I can show you how the process that I went through to get to these outcomes. And I know some programs are going to smaller proposals, maybe not a 20 to 30 page proposal like in the beginning we were seeing so commonly. Maybe especially then if you're having a smaller proposal, that you would encourage students to keep a notebook that shows the process, that doesn't go into a smaller proposal, but that you can come back and find out what their literature review looked like, what kind of a SWOT analysis or needs assessment that they did. And this, again, can be a useful tool for thinking about accountability. It also moves into then the AACN essentials. If we take the example, let's use the example of Brenda, who was on the ortho unit and working with her standardized care path. What she did, again, was a quality improvement project. Could we call it clinical scholarship? I would say definitely it was clinical scholarship if she was able to document and share and have it peer reviewed. Those are some of the pieces that go into scholarship. And certainly with our DNP projects, the way we do those at KU, that would work out. Again, AACN essentials, how can we more incorporate these into student projects? Well, with our quality improvement project, what we found was that there's an essential for quality and safety, systems-based practice, interprofessional partnerships are all integrated. So again, if she does a reflective component of how her project helped meet these, she's in good shape with that. She also then could move from concepts to competence. A textbook, we've got guiding her through particular project, and reflective questions in the textbook help her say, okay, this is how I have moved forward with the literature review, how I've moved forward with the needs assessment. So again, I've been a big fan of project notebooks as a way to help students document and be accountable for their work. So, anything more on that, Kit?
I don't think so right now.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Case example, June's project continued. Let's go to our next slide, please. Why, there's a surprise. There is our project triangle again. And we will bring back June. And you remember June was our GNP who was worried about communication between the nurses and the providers in the long-term care setting. And her purpose and methods and outcomes, as we've talked about, were all implemented in her DNP project, which again, we are happy to report because June came to our final presentation day at University of Kansas, and that's our goal. We talked early on about putting a proposal together, but then we really, really want our students to put together a quality project that can be helpful to their students, to their patients, to their staff, to all the individuals involved. So we were happy when June came and shared. You remember her purpose, improving communication, her methods. She had an educational program and pocket cards to remind the staff to use those. And her outcomes, she then looked at staff knowledge and use and comfort with these particular tools. So again, we were very happy. Her first, her final presentation said, okay, right after we implemented this project, everything went great. Everybody improved. We had high scores. Everybody did really well. But being a smart individual and using the good quality improvement process, June had additionally built in that she was going to, at a month, go back to the setting and give the same tools to measure, were they continuing to have knowledge about communication tools? Were they continuing to engage professionally with the physicians and providers and nurse practitioners in client care? Any guesses as to what happened a month later? Unfortunately, unfortunately, June's project worked initially, but then a month later, there were problems. They had kind of forgotten, were we supposed to keep those cards with us all the time? Was that really an important thing to be doing? So we had challenges for this particular project in a month, but what does a good quality improvement project do? It brings the team together, brings the affected people together, and we have a debriefing session. So what happened? So what? And now what? And so we were able to put together a next step. It wasn't June's project was finished, but she was able to lead the debriefing and get the staff to move forward with the next part of their project. So, all righty, that was June's example shared with us. Our next slide, please. Kit and I, you've noticed we've used a lot of active, engaged learning opportunities, and we wanted to share a bibliography with you so that you could continue your reading. Some of our favorites: Making It Stick, Small Teaching, How Learning Works, and How People Learn. So again, we will leave that with you, and we will move to our next slide, please. Again, we so appreciate that you have been here with us today. And we're going to ask you to think about what opportunities that you can use to help your students. We have talked about one-page tools, such as a visual triangle, such as a checklist, such as a care map, a reference map. We have asked you to think about, are there ways that you can build in self and peer review before the documents come to you? We've talked about project notebooks, abstracts, a variety of things. So we know you've got many good tools that you're already using, but we're hoping that those have stimulated some thinking for you and that those can be useful as well. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being educators.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Wanda and Kit, for an excellent and informative presentation. We're going to go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your control panel. So the first question we have for you, Wanda and Kit, is, I'm not sure how the project template map is used logistically. Is it a fill in the blanks or a checklist?
I would respond to that. I think that you can start with it as a checklist if you want, but then the real idea is to move it forward as adding more detail than just a checklist allows. The checklist is just yes or no, is it there? Now we want to start adding more detail so that we can encourage the students to be thinking about what next, what's that next piece. And then again, that one-page abstract, again, the narrative in that care map can, or in that map can help move forward to that early abstract. So getting the narrative, getting the words on paper sometimes is challenging. Thanks, that was a good question.
The second question is, what are the most common challenges you see DNP students face when identifying a clinical problem or a project idea?
Well, I would say that some of those that we've thought about, again, we have great clinicians come to us many times in our programs, and they have wonderful ideas, but again, it's helping them to make these projects doable. So again, one way that we've found these one-page tools is helpful just for early discussions. What piece could you possibly do? I'm thinking back to Brenda and her care maps. She did her project over several semesters, and we had a number of pieces she wanted to develop, but she developed different pieces over different semesters and then pulled them all together for her final project. So that's one approach. Do you have others, Kit, you'd want to add?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems is just keeping that focus, and secondly, keeping the project consistent, which is one reason why we really like the project triangle. Because if a student says, this is the problem, and this is how I'm going to get to it, again, those pieces need to be consistent. So when they find themselves kind of floundering and not really being on track, that triangle really helps them look and make sure that all the pieces are there and again are just consistent with one another.
Great. Another question from our audience. I've had two projects in the past year that had outcomes that showed the need did not exist to begin with. How do you do a needs assessment? I don't think we've emphasized that in our program.
Well, I would say that, again, that's part of naming the problem. And again, we didn't address that too much today, but certainly a formalized needs assessment. Sometimes there are documents that the organization already has pulled together that talks about the challenges and successes before they have an accreditation visit or something. I don't think we always have to start from page one, but or square one, but we do have to think about, is this truly needed? Is the agency think that it's needed? Do the staff think that it's needed? So again, that may be an early semester type of project where you're looking at the needs assessment. I know that Brenda on hers, she did a very nice SWOT analysis that involved all the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats on her ortho unit. So I would agree with you that that is important to be thinking about. How have we addressed the need for this project, the problem?
Yeah, and I think for quality improvement projects, that needs assessment is really important. If it's a different type of project, then you may be looking at the review of literature and making sure that you've really caught what truly is the state of the science now. And that would let you know then if this project really needs to be done or not.
Great. Our next question, at what point in the project timeline should students be encouraged to begin using these visual tools to map out their project?
Well, I think that's another very good question. And how Kit and I have liked to see this used is as soon as they can clearly name a problem and to start brainstorming with these particular tools. Again, there are additional brainstorming tools. We use concept maps. We use all kinds of discussion board activities to keep people brainstorming. But again, as early in the process as possible, once you've got that problem named, think it makes sense to figure out what this whole picture is going to look like. Even if you, again, don't know all of the details well, you can at least a checklist format say, well, it needs to be there. I'm going to have to read more on this. It needs to be there. So again, early on, I think we'd say.
Yeah, from the very beginning. Even we didn't talk about this, and in our book, we talk about moving people from a problem statement or what's the issue to the purpose statement and some some steps in between. and you can even just have them write those out so they can visually see them on one page to move from one part of the process to the next.
And that's actually a great point, Kit, because we have another question that came to us that says students often come to the table with their solution rather than identifying the problem. I'm sure you've experienced this too. Any words of wisdom?
Well, I would say that when we put modules together for our students to work through and book chapters, we ask them to think about how have you documented the need for this problem. I think that, again, that's a very good statement. If you come with a solution before you've clearly named the problem and have the team on board, that's a big problem. So again, adding more detail on that need, maybe you need another checklist before we get to our triangle where we figure out how we have checked off that this is an important problem and why it's an important problem. I know we have some tools in our textbook to help us do that.
Yeah, and I think Wanda talked a lot about templates. We really have a lot of smaller templates that breaks the process down more. And
Right.
So again, like I was just saying, I mean, you can take almost any aspect of the project and break it down into a one page that lets them visual, even if it's just a sentence here, and it doesn't have to be a diagram to visualize. It can be words that help them actually see how they're moving from one piece to the next.
Great. The next question is, what effective strategies have you found to make sustainability possible?
Well, I think that the example that I shared with June at her GNP and long-term care setting, that initially the project worked, but then there were a month later, there were challenges. Not everybody was doing it. A lot of people had let it slide. So again, sustainability, I think you've got to build in that discussion. And again, if your project is completed, we also talk about students carving out a piece of their project. And then the next project would be a follow-up to that. What next? And we a lot of times have our DNP students do a debriefing before they leave with their staff team, the people that have participated. And again, it can be as simple as answering those questions. What happened? So what? And now what? Found that those questions work really well for stopping and thinking about a lot of pieces. So again, those are my initial thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Then we have a topic that has come up in our world today. Next semester, we are incorporating use of Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental AI for students to create a project's goal, SMART objectives, task timeline table, and a measurement and evaluation plan table. Generative AI is also a great resource to teach about concepts. If students enter their project problem statement, aim statement, and method/intervention summary with some additional context, generative AI provides excellent responses. Would you ever consider using generative AI to help the project planning process?
Well, let me just say that this is a personal opinion at this point in time. I'm not quite ready to do that, but I know that others are. And I would just consider that it's a type of brainstorming for the student. They have to say, okay, here's some suggestions. Now what? Is this even feasible in the particular setting that I'm at? So again, my personal response would be, I'm not quite ready, but for those that are thinking about it as a part of a brainstorming session, the student really needs to follow up and do the work based on what's been shared.
And I think that whether we're ready or not, it's definitely coming. So we might as well go there. And my only thought is just to be sure that we and the students are aware of the limitations of doing that.
Great.
And that would be my main point.
Great. And we have one last question. Do you have any tips for the student to discuss project ideas with the site to engage the stakeholders and administrators for acceptance of the student doing a project at the site?
Well, I know that is a tricky question that, and there are lots of challenges. Again, challenges of bringing two agencies together, education and practice. But I think the tips, again, if you engage people in your needs assessment, do they see this as needed? And then maybe even some kind of, here's a debriefing session, here's the needs issues that we've found. What would be your recommendations? What do you think about this idea that I have? I don't know that I've got a one answer on that, but I think engaging the team at every point that you can before you get started is a good idea.
Yeah, and I can only agree with Wanda. I think the earlier the better.
Great. That's great. So it looks like we've covered all of our questions today. We want to thank everyone for spending the time with us today, and thank you again to our hosts, Wanda Bonnell and Kit Smith, for the great presentation. If you're interested in purchasing their book, the new edition comes out next week, by the way, Proposal Writing for the DNP Project, 4th edition. You will be able to receive a 25% discount using the code webinar25 at the checkout on springerpub.com. As a reminder, the recorded session will be available on springerpub.com in 5 to 7 business days. And we want to wish everybody a great afternoon And we look forward to all of you joining us for future Springer Publishing webinars. Thanks again, Wanda and Kit. It was a great presentation, totally engaged audience. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Great.
you all very
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you to the audience and to Springer. We appreciate your help. Take care.
Yes, thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.